They said the mating hunt was an honor, that the chosen females who ran at midnight felt the thrill of it in their blood, that being caught meant destiny had finally found them. They said a lot of things about the hunt that Rosalie had stopped believing 5 years ago. What they never said, not in polite company, was that the women who ran fastest were the ones who understood what was truly being hunted. What comes next will change everything Rosalie thought she knew about the Alpha King who catches her, and the secret buried in her body. But first, she has to survive the night. Rosalie didn't pack much. That was the first rule of running. Weight was the enemy. She took a hunting knife, a wrapped heel of bread, and the small vial of ashroot oil she'd spent 3 months acquiring, one careful trade at a time. Ashroot masked her scent. Not perfectly, but well enough to buy her time. She didn't take the dress they'd laid out for her. That pale silver confection was meant to shimmer in moonlight, as if the women being hunted should make it easy. Instead, she took her worn leather pants, her oldest boots, the dark wool cloak her mother had left her. The cloak smelled faintly of clay and lavender, and sometimes when the cold got bad, Rosalie pulled it tighter and pretended her mother was still alive to tell her what to do. Her mother would have told her to run. She was certain of that. The village of Cressfall sat at the edge of the Aldenmoor forest, which meant Rosalie had a half-mile head start on any challenger before the trees swallowed her. The other girls chosen for the hunt, 4 of them, had been dressed and primped since sundown. 3 of them had seemed almost eager. The horn sounded at midnight, but by then, she was already gone. The Aldenmoor at night was not a forest that forgave carelessness. Rosalie had grown up on its edges. She knew which routes would trip her, which stream crossings would hold her weight, which ravines looked passable, but weren't. She moved fast, angling northeast toward the shale-strewn ridges, terrain where loose rock made it hard for the young village alphas to track her. She'd planned this, quietly, carefully, over months. What she had not planned for was the sound of a second set of footsteps, not behind her, where the hunt began, but ahead, already waiting. The footsteps were deliberate, not the crashing, eager pursuit of the village alphas, but measured, like a predator who knew the prey had nowhere left to run. Rosalie skidded to a halt on the loose rocks, trying to collect her thoughts. The ridge she'd aimed for rose sharply to her left, pines thickening into a wall of black needles that swallowed moonlight. She could still go there and drop into the ravine. But the sound came again, a single boot scraping stone, close enough that she felt the vibration in her soles. She drew the hunting knife from her belt, the blade catching a thin silver thread of light. Her breath fogged in the chill air. Whoever waited had anticipated her path, so they either guessed her plan or knew her. No time to wonder. She bolted left, toward the pines, low and fast, cloak snagging on branches. The forest closed around her like a fist. Needles brushed her face, resin sharp in her nostrils. She ducked under a low branch, rolled her shoulder to avoid a trunk, and kept moving. The footsteps followed, not faster, but matching her pace without effort. Panic clawed up her throat. She risked a glance back, nothing but shifting shadows. But the scent hit her then, pine and storm wind, undercut with something warmer, like sun-baked leather and smoke. Alpha. Powerful. Not one of the village boys drunk on moonlust and bravado. This was older, deeper, the kind of scent that made the fine hairs on her arms stand up and her suppressed instincts stir despite the ashroot. She pushed harder, lungs burning, thighs screaming. The ridge leveled out into a small clearing ringed by ancient oaks, there, trunks wide as cottages, roots buckling the earth like veins. Moonlight pooled here in pale patches, turning the ground ghostly. She burst into the open space, spun around, knife raised, and froze. A man stood at the far edge, half in shadow, half in silver light. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark traveling leathers that spoke of quiet wealth. No crown, no insignia, but the way he held himself, watchful, utterly certain, marked him as something more than a hunter from Crestfall. His eyes found hers, amber, flecked with gold, glowing faintly in the dark. Recognition flickered across his face, not sharp, but hazy, like a memory trying to surface through water. Rosalie took a step back. Her boot caught on a root, and she pitched sideways, heart slamming into her throat. She slapped a palm against the oak to stop the fall, rough bark biting into her skin, scraping her palm raw. She hissed through clenched teeth, the sting grounding her just enough to keep the knife steady. Moved then, not lunging, but closing the distance with long, unhurried strides. She raised the knife higher, point locked on his chest despite the tremor in her arms. "Stay back," she said, voice low, steady. "I won't be claimed tonight. Not by you. Not by anyone." He stopped a few paces away, close enough that she could see the faint scar running along his jaw, the way his dark hair fell just past his collar, tousled from the chase. His gaze dropped to the knife, then back to her face. A half smile curved his mouth, not mocking, but almost amused, as if she were a puzzle he hadn't expected to enjoy solving. "You run like someone with secrets, Rosalie," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the clearing. Her name on his lips sent ice down her spine. How did he know it? The village elders hadn't announced names during the selection, to preserve some illusion of mystery. Most people here didn't know her name, since she'd fled the borderlands 5 years ago. "Who are you?" she demanded. He tilted his head, studying her the way a wolf sizes up something that might bite back. "Roman. Roman. Alpha King Roman. The man who ruled from the high spires of Eldrath, who had ended the border wars in a single bloody summer. But he never bothered with village hunts, because why bother chasing when the entire kingdom already knelt at his feet? Except tonight, he was here, in the Aldenmoor, waiting for her. Her grip on the knife slipped for half a heartbeat before she locked it tight again. "That doesn't make any sense. You don't do hunts. Everyone knows that." He took one more step, slow, deliberate. "I received a letter, anonymous. It said the one who was taken from me would run tonight in these woods. I came to see if it was true." Taken from him. The words sank into her, heavy and wrong. Rosalie's thoughts raced. Letter, trap, setup, ambush, each possibility sharper than the last. Who would know enough to write that? And why send it straight to the king? Then the mate bond stirred, a sudden living pull deep in her chest, like a rope yanked taut despite being buried under ashroot and willpower. Heat bloomed low in her belly, uninvited but undeniable. Her skin prickled, her breath hitched. She'd never felt anything like this. Raw, electric, as if her body recognized him before her mind could say no. Pulse hammering in her throat, thighs clenching against the traitorous warmth spreading between them. She hated every second of it. Hated how his nearness made fear feel like something else entirely. "I don't belong to you," she said through clenched teeth. "I don't belong to anyone." Roman's gaze darkened, amber flaring brighter in the moonlight. "The bond doesn't ask permission, Rosalie. It simply is." He closed the last distance in a heartbeat. One hand snared her wrist, her knife hand, firm, unyielding, but careful not to bruise. The other planted beside her head against the oak, caging her in without touching. His heat crashed over her like a wave, pine, storm wind, and that smoky undertone that made her want to lean in and breathe deeper. She twisted hard, trying to bring the blade up, but he was faster, stronger. He pressed her wrist against the bark until the knife slipped from her fingers and thudded to the ground. "Let go of me," she hissed, voice cracking with fury and something hotter she refused to name. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, right over her racing pulse. Her body betrayed her with a soft, involuntary arch toward him. She bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste blood. "You feel it," he murmured. "Even through whatever you've used to hide yourself. Ashroot, isn't it? Clever, but not enough to drown a true bond. How do you—" She stopped. Of course he knew. He was the king. He probably had spies in every village, ears in every shadow. Roman's free hand lifted, hovering near her cheek without touching. 5 years ago, there was a raid on the border. A pack. Burned. I arrived too late. I carried a girl out of the smoke. Scared, bleeding, barely conscious. I promised her father I'd protect any survivors. Then she vanished. Rosalie's breath snagged in her throat. Smoke. Fire. The iron grip of arms lifting her when her legs had given out. She'd thought it was a dream, a fevered memory warped by grief. But it was him? Roman? The king who'd come too late. Her pulse thundered in her ears, loud enough to drown the distant howls from the hunt still taking place. She stared at him, the pieces clicking together with brutal clarity, and something raw cracked open behind her ribs. Relief, terror, all tangled into one searing knot. "I didn't want to be found," she said, voice cracking despite herself. Roman's eyes searched hers, raw with something like regret. "I looked. For months. The bond was new, fragile. And then it faded. I told myself there were no survivors, that the guilt was just another scar from the war." He leaned closer, forehead nearly brushing hers, his breath warm against her lips. "I suppose the ash root you've been drowning yourself in did its job. It buried your scent so deep I couldn't follow it. You were a ghost. Until tonight." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "But tonight, the moment I caught your scent on the wind, it woke up. All of it." Rosalie swallowed hard, throat tight. The bond thrummed between them, insistent, undeniable, like a second heartbeat echoing her own. Through the thin space separating them, she felt his pulse. Steady, strong, sinking with hers in a rhythm that felt older than the forest itself. "I won't be your prize," she whispered. "The hunt is a lie. It's not destiny. It's power. And I've seen what alphas do when they taste it." Roman's jaw flexed, a muscle ticking under the skin. "I'm not here to claim you against your will, but I won't let the others have you either." He tilted his head toward the darkness. "Listen, the howls are closing. You run. Again, they'll catch you. And they won't ask. They won't stop." She knew he was right. The village alphas were young, moon-drunk, ruled by instinct and the thrill of the chase. Her past, her pain, none of it would matter. Only the catch. Roman eased his grip on her wrist, slow enough that she could pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Not yet. His thumb lingered a heartbeat longer over her pulse, then fell away. "Come with me," he said, voice quiet but firm. "To Eldrath, under my protection. No claiming, no forced bond, just safety until the moon wanes and we figure out what this is." Rosalie stared at him, the king of the realm, offering her terms like she held the upper hand. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity. Part of her wanted to run anyway, consequences be damned. But the howls sharpened, multiple voices converging fast, and the bond between them hummed like a live wire, pulling, promising, terrifying. She bent, scooped up her knife, sheathed it with a sharp snap, then lifted her eyes to his. "One condition," she said. "You tell me everything you remember about that night, every detail, no omissions. And if I decide to leave when the moon sets, you let me go. No pursuit, no guards." Roman held her gaze for a long beat, searching. Then he gave one sharp nod. "Agreed." He stepped back, giving her room, though the bond still stretched taut between them like an invisible tether. Rosalie exhaled, shaky, lungs burning from more than the run. Then lead the way, Your Majesty. But know this, if you lie to me, I'll bury this knife in your heart before the sun rises. A ghost of a smile flickered across his lips. Respect, maybe even amusement. I wouldn't expect anything less, Rosalie. He turned, gesturing toward a narrow path slicing through the pines. Rosalie fell in behind him, cloak pulled tight, every sense razor sharp. Behind them, the howls rose in frustrated snarls as the other alphas lost the trail. Ahead, the night stretched dark and uncertain. And between them, the bond burned quietly, patient, relentless, waiting for the moment one of them finally gave in. The path wound downward, shale crunching underfoot. Roman moved with the easy grace of someone born to the wilds, but he kept glancing back, quick flickers of amber eyes catching hers, not checking if she followed. The bond made that unnecessary. He was looking to see if she was all right, if the run had left her limping, if the cuts on her face still bled, if the weight of the night was pressing too hard on her shoulders. Rosalie kept pace, knife hand loose but ready, trying to avoid his gaze. The forest thinned as they descended, moonlight spilling wider between the trees like pale rivers. Somewhere distant, a wolf cried, wild, unburdened, and the sound sliced straight through her. She hadn't shifted in years. The ash root had done more than mask her scent. It had chained her wolf deep inside, where it paced and snarled in restless silence. Every full moon, she'd felt it clawing at the edges, begging for release, only to be shoved back down with another bitter drop of the elixir. Tonight, the suppression was fraying, threads unraveling under the pull of the bond and the moon's relentless gaze, and she could feel her wolf stirring again, aching, hungry for fur and fangs and the simple freedom of 4 legs on the earth. Roman broke the silence first. You're wearing your mother's cloak. I remember that scent from the night of the raid. It clung to you when I carried you out of the smoke. Her steps faltered. Did you really carry me? Through the worst of it, he said. You were half conscious, bleeding from a gash on your arm. I tore my shirt to bind it until we reached the healer's camp. You woke long enough to look at me, then passed out again. Rosalie pressed her fingers to the faint scar hidden beneath her sleeve. She'd convinced herself it came from falling debris, not claws or steel. But now the memory rose sharp and unbidden, strong arms scooping her up, a steady voice whispering low assurances, pine and storm winds slicing through the stench of fire. Her throat tightened. Why didn't you stay? She asked. I had to chase the raiders. They scattered fast. I caught 3, interrogated them. They swore they were hired by border outlaws. No names, no proof. I searched for you afterward, but you were already gone. Because I chose to be. Her voice was flat. I saw what alphas do when they corner a lone omega. I wasn't going to be another casualty. Roman slowed at a narrow stream, moonlight silvering the water. He crouched, cupped his hands, drank deeply, then rose and stepped aside, offering her the spot without a word. She hesitated, then knelt. Cold water splashed her face, sharp enough to jolt her thoughts clear. She drank until the ache in her chest eased a fraction. When she stood, he was watching, not predatory, but attentive, eyes tracing the lines of exhaustion on her face. You think I'm like them? I think power changes people, she said quietly. Even the good ones. He nodded slowly. Fair. But I didn't come here to hunt you, Rosalie. I came because the letter said you'd be here, and because some part of me has been searching for 5 years without knowing why. The bond pulsed again, warmer now, carrying the raw edge of his sincerity straight into her chest. It terrified her more than any lie ever could. We should keep moving, she said. The others won't give up easily. Roman glanced back the way they'd come. They've lost the trail. My scent masks yours now. The bond helps with that. They pressed on. The night deepened around them, thick with pine and silence. Roman led her to a sheltered overhang where the rock face curved into a shallow cave. He gathered dry wood with quick, practiced movements, struck flint, coaxed a small, smokeless fire to life. Rosalie sank down opposite him, knees drawn up, watching the flames play across his features. The old scar, along his jaw, the faint lines at his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. "Why do you avoid the hunts? The court must be breathing down your neck for an heir." His expression tightened, just for a moment. "Because every time I consider it, something inside me rebels, like claiming anyone else would be wrong. I thought it was guilt from the war. Now I know it was the bond. Waiting." Rosalie forced herself to look away. The fire popped. Then, changing the subject, she said, "Tell me about the letter." Roman leaned back against the rock. "It came by Raven at dusk. No seal, no signature, just coordinates for Cressfall and a single line. The one taken from you runs tonight. Find her before they do." I thought it was a trap, but I had to come anyway. "Who would know about us?" she asked. "About that night?" He shook his head. "No one alive should. The raiders I caught died in the dungeons. The ledger your father gave me is locked in my private vault. I've read it 100 times. Routes, shipments, coded names. Never found the source." Rosalie reached under her shirt and drew out a locket, silver, dented, still warm from her skin. She opened it with careful fingers, revealing the tiny folded parchment her father had pressed into her hand before shoving her toward the root cellar. She passed it across the fire. Roman took it gently, unfolded the fragile paper, and scanned the lines. His eyes widened fractionally. "This matches the ledger. Exact roots. But there's a symbol here I don't recognize." He traced the small glyph in the margin, a circle bisected by a jagged line. "It wasn't in the main pages." Rosalie's throat tightened. "My father said it was a mark used by the one giving orders. He never learned the name." Roman stared at the symbol for a long moment, then folded the paper and handed it back. "We'll find out. Together." The words settled between them, weighted and warm. Rosalie closed the locket with a soft click. "I'm not staying in. Eldrath forever. But if there's a chance to end the Shadowroot trade, to stop whatever killed my family, I'll help you." Roman met her eyes across the flames. "Agreed." The fire crackled between them, sparks drifting upward into the night. The bond hummed softly, a quiet promise neither was ready to name. Outside, the moon rode high. The hunt raged on without them. And somewhere in the kingdom, a raven circled back toward the capital, carrying news that the king had found what he'd lost. Dawn broke gray over the eastern ridge, the first pale light filtering through the pines like smoke. Rosalie walked beside Roman now, no longer trailing but matching his stride, close enough that their arms brushed once, twice, each accidental touch sending a fresh spark through the bond. They reached the edge of the forest where a massive black stallion waited, tethered to a low branch, ears flicking at their approach. The horse snorted softly, recognizing Roman, but its gaze slid to Rosalie with wary curiosity. Roman untied the reins. "He's steady, won't spook." He turned to her, offering a hand. "Mount up. We ride for Eldrath before the sun clears the trees." Rosalie stared at the offered hand. "Thanks, but I don't need help riding." "I know." His voice was quiet, almost gentle. "But you're exhausted. Let me help." She hesitated only a moment, pride warring with bone-deep fatigue, then placed her palm in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and sure, and he lifted her effortlessly into the saddle. Before she could settle, he swung up behind her, thighs bracketing hers, chest pressing to her back. The contact was immediate, overwhelming, his heat seeping through her cloak, his arms coming around her to take the reins, his breath stirring the hair at her nape. Rosalie stiffened. "I thought we said no claiming." "This isn't claiming," he murmured against her ear. "This is necessity. The trails are narrow, and you're shaking." She was, but not just from cold. The bond thrummed louder now, insistent, every point of contact feeding it like kindling to flame. She could feel his heartbeat against her spine, strong, steady, mirroring hers in a rhythm that made her skin flush hot despite the morning chill. Roman clicked his tongue and the stallion moved, smooth and powerful, carrying them out of the trees and onto the open road toward the capital. Rosalie gripped the saddle horn, trying to ignore the way Roman's thighs flexed against hers with every stride, the way his hands brushed her waist when he adjusted the reins. The wind whipped past, carrying the scent of him, and her suppressed heat answered, insistent, aching, making her bite her lip to stifle any sound. The ash root's hold was fraying faster with every mile they covered. By mid-morning, the road climbed into rolling hills, Eldrath's white spires just visible on the horizon like teeth against the sky. Roman slowed the stallion to a walk as they crested a rise. "You've been quiet," he said softly. "So have you." "I'm thinking about the letter, about the symbol in your father's notes, about how someone knew enough to draw me to you." Rosalie turned her head slightly, catching his profile in the corner of her eye. "You think it's a trap?" "Well, whoever wrote it wanted me to find you. The question is why." She swallowed. "Maybe because I'm the last witness to the raid? The last piece of proof my father had? Maybe." Roman's arm tightened protectively around her waist. "Or maybe because they knew what the bond would do once I got close enough." Rosalie felt the truth of his words in her bones. The ash root had kept her hidden, but nothing could hide her from him now that they were this close. The bond was alive, burning, and every mile brought it closer to the surface. They reached the outer gates of Eldrath by late afternoon. The city sprawled below the castle like a living thing. White stone walls, banners snapping in the wind, the faint clamor of markets and forges drifting up on the breeze. Guards snapped to attention as Roman rode through, eyes widening at the woman in front of him, but no one dared question their king. Roman guided the stallion through winding streets toward the castle's private stables. He dismounted first, then reached up to help Rosalie down. His hands spanned her waist, steady and warm, and for a heartbeat she let herself linger in the circle of his arms before stepping back. Roman led her through a side door into the castle's lower halls, quiet corridors of polished stone and flickering torchlight. No grand entrance, no announcement, just the two of them, moving like shadows. He showed her to a chamber near the western wing, simple but comfortable. A wide bed draped in dark wool, a hearth already lit, a basin of steaming water waiting. Roman paused in the doorway, his broad frame filling the space, eyes sweeping over her once, slow, careful, cataloging the dried blood on her cheekbones, the dirt streaking her neck, the way her cloak hung torn and heavy. "You can rest here," he said. "No one will come near this door unless I send them." He reached past her, lifting a thick wool blanket from the foot of the bed and draped it over her shoulders, tucking the edges against the chill still clinging to her skin. Rosalie nodded, suddenly hyper-aware of how close he stood, how his scent wrapped around her. "Thank you." Roman paused at the door, hand on the frame. "I'll be in the study across the hall. Come find me when you're ready. We should start with the ledger." Rosalie exhaled, shaky. The room felt too quiet after he was gone. Then she stripped off her cloak, her torn shirt, washed the blood and dirt from her face and hands. The hot water stung the scrapes on her palms, but it felt good, cleansing. She changed into the simple linen shift and trousers left on the bed, braided her damp hair, and stared at herself in the small mirror. She looked like a stranger, hollow-eyed, fierce, the faint scar on her arm a pale line against her skin. She wasn't ready for any of this, but she wasn't running anymore either. Across the hall, Roman's study was warm with lamplight and the smell of old parchment. He stood at the long table, sleeves rolled to his elbows, the ledger open before him as he traced a line of coded payments with one scarred finger. His dark hair had fallen into his eyes, and he pushed it back absently, until he looked up and saw her in the doorway. Something in his face softened instantly. His gaze swept over her, slow, deliberate, appreciative, taking in the clean shift she'd changed into, the faint flush still lingering on her cheeks from the hot water. "You clean up beautifully," he said, "though I have to admit I like the wild look too. The pine needles suited you." Rosalie felt heat crawl up her neck despite herself. She crossed her arms, trying to hide how the words landed. "Let's start with what my father wrote." He smiled, small, crooked, and pulled her chair closer to his before he sat again. They worked through the night side by side, shoulders nearly touching. Roman read aloud from the ledger, routes, dates, coded payments, pausing whenever she leaned in to point out a detail from memory or the parchment in her locket. Every time their arms brushed or her knee bumped his under the table, the bond sparked softly, like embers flaring. The symbol in the margin kept pulling their eyes back, a circle bisected by a jagged line, simple but deliberate. Neither had seen it before, but it felt like the key to everything, a quiet taunt on the page. Hours slipped away. The fire burned low, casting long shadows across the room. Roman's voice grew rougher with fatigue. When Rosalie's gaze drifted to the window, where the moon still hung high and smug, he noticed immediately. He set the quill down. "You're exhausted. We can continue tomorrow." She shook her head. "I'm fine." He stood, came around the table, and knelt in front of her chair. Before she could protect, he reached for her hands, gentle, deliberate, turning them palm up in his larger ones. His thumbs brushed lightly over the raw scrapes on her palms, the ones she'd earned slamming into the oak during the chase. "These are still open," he murmured. "You didn't say anything." She shrugged. "They're nothing." His gaze lifted to hers, dark and steady. "I can heal them, if you'll let me." She nodded once, barely. Roman exhaled, a sound almost like relief. He lifted her right hand first, cradling it between both of his. His thumbs traced the edges of the scrapes once more, then he brought her palm to his lips. The kiss was soft, his mouth warm against the raw skin. Heat bloomed instantly, not just from contact, but from something deeper. The bond flaring bright, his magic flowing through it like sunlight on frost. She felt it move, gentle, insistent, threading, through the torn flesh, coaxing cells to knit, inflammation to fade. When he pulled back, her hand was smooth again, unmarked, soft as if the scrapes had never happened. Rosalie stared at her palms, flexing her fingers. No sting, no tenderness, just warm, whole skin. She looked up at him. "That's not something everyone can do." "No," he said quietly. "It's rare. Royal bloodline." He gave a small, crooked smile. "It's useful for stubborn women who won't admit they're hurt." She huffed a laugh despite herself. "Thank you." He rose slowly, offering his hand. "Come. You need rest." She took it. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, and he led her back across the hall to her chamber. At the door he paused, thumb brushing once over her newly healed palm in a lingering caress. "I'll be right across the hall if you need me," he said softly. Rosalie nodded, throat tight. "Good night, Roman." "Good night, Rosalie." He waited until she stepped inside and closed the door before turning away. She leaned against the wood for a long moment, listening to his footsteps retreat, heart racing. The bond hummed, warm and steady, but beneath it something else stirred, a low, insistent ache in her core. Her suppressed heat was rising, the ash root failing faster than she'd feared. She pressed her thighs together, trying to ignore it, but the memory of Roman's mouth on her palm lingered. She crawled into the bed, pulled the covers tight, and tried to sleep. But the nightmares came anyway. She was 16 again, curled in the cellar while flames roared overhead. Her father's voice, urgent, calm, telling her to run, to live. Then smoke choked the air, fire licked the beams above, and strong arms lifted her when her legs buckled. A voice cut through the chaos, promising safety. Roman's voice. But the dream twisted. The arms became claws raking her skin. The promise became mocking laughter. The cellar walls closed in, crushing her chest, and she couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. She woke gasping, lungs seizing, body drenched in cold sweat. The room spun. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. She curled tighter on the bed, knees to chest, shaking uncontrollably, tears streaming hot down her cheeks. She tried to force air past the knot in her throat, but every breath came ragged, panicked. Across the hall, Roman jolted awake in his own chambers, the same dream burning behind his eyes. He dressed quickly, crossed the corridor, knocked softly. "Rosalie?" No answer, only muffled, choked sobs. He pushed the door open. She was on the bed, curled into a tight ball, shaking, face buried in her arms. Her breathing was too fast, too shallow, hyperventilating, lost somewhere between past and present. Roman crossed the room, gathered her into his arms, and pulled her against his chest. He rocked her gently, hands stroking slow circles down her spine, long, soothing strokes that matched the rhythm he wanted, her lungs to follow. The bond thrummed between them, warm and steady, carrying his calm into her like a tide pulling back the panic. He kept whispering, soft, repetitive things. "I'm here. It's over. You're not in the fire. You're with me." Minutes passed. Her breathing slowed until she was drawing full, shaky breaths against his chest. Roman didn't let go. He shifted them both until he was sitting against the headboard, her tucked into his side, his arms still locked around her shoulders. "Sleep," he whispered. "I'm not leaving." She leaned into him, exhausted, and let the bond lull her under. Morning came too soon. Rosalie woke to Roman still beside her, his head tipped back against the headboard, eyes closed but not asleep. He opened them the moment she stirred. "You stayed," she murmured. "I said I would." She sat up, suddenly aware of how close they were, his thigh pressed against hers, his hand resting near her hip. The bond hummed contentedly between them, but beneath that gentle thrum, her suppressed heat surged again, sharper, hungrier than before. A low ache bloomed low in her belly, insistent, making her thighs clench involuntarily. She shifted away, cheeks burning, trying to put space between them. Roman noticed. His gaze dropped for a fraction of a second to where her shift had ridden up her thigh, then snapped back to her face. But not before she saw it. The way his pupils dilated, the faint flush creeping along his neck. He was visibly, unmistakably aroused, straining against the laces of his trousers. "It's the moon," he said quietly, voice gravel rough from lack of sleep. "And the bond. It's pulling everything to the surface." "I know." Her own voice came out tight, breathless. "The ash root isn't holding anymore." He nodded, expression serious but eyes burning. "We need to be careful. If your heat breaks fully here, without protection." "I know what happens." She met his eyes, defiant, even as her body betrayed her. "I won't let it." Roman exhaled slowly, the sound almost pained. He reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her cheek. "You don't have to fight it alone." She caught his wrist. I'm not ready. I know. His thumb traced slow circles over her racing pulse. But when you are... He leaned in, close enough that his breath ghosted her lips. I'll be here. All of me. The moment stretched, heated, electric. It took all the willpower in her body to stand up and pull on her cloak. Let's find the source of that symbol, she said, voice unsteady but determined, before whoever sent the letter decides to make the next move. They spent the day moving through the castle like ghosts. Roman introduced her simply as a border refugee under his protection. Servants whispered, but no one questioned the king. Rosalie kept to the shadows, ears open, watching every interaction, every glance. She needed to understand the palace's rhythms, who held power, who moved unseen. But something was wrong with the bond. It happened in a quiet corridor near the eastern wing, late in the afternoon. They were walking side by side, shoulders almost brushing, when the thread between them suddenly thinned, like someone had pinched the flame of a candle. The warmth dimmed, the steady hum stuttered, and for 3 heartbeats Rosalie felt nothing. No pull, no echo of Roman's heartbeat against hers, just empty air. She stopped dead. Roman stopped too, a fraction later. His hand lifted to his temple, fingers pressing hard as if trying to hold something inside his head. His face paled. A fine sheen of sweat appeared along his hairline. For a moment, his eyes went distant, unfocused, like he was looking through her instead of at her. Roman? Her voice came out sharper than she intended. He blinked, hard, and the bond snapped back, warm again, strong, as if nothing had happened. But his breathing stayed uneven. He lowered his hand slowly, knuckles white. Headache. Old war injury. Nothing new. Rosalie stared at him. You went somewhere, she said quietly. Just for a second. Your eyes. You weren't here. Roman exhaled through his nose, rubbing the bridge between his eyes. It happens sometimes. A flicker. A gap. Like my thoughts slip out of reach. He gave a small, tired smile. I thought it was just fatigue. Or guilt. The war left a lot of things broken. She didn't smile back. The chill in her gut had nothing to do with the stone corridor. How often? Often enough that I'm starting to think you're the cure. His gaze flicked to hers, softer now, teasing. Did you miss me while I was gone? Rosalie huffed, the sound half laugh, half exasperation. You're impossible. The bond thrummed between them again, steady now, warm. But the memory of that sudden, hollow silence lingered like frost on glass. That night, while Roman reviewed maps in his study, Rosalie slipped away. Earlier, she'd overheard a servant mention the lower stores, a maze of cellars where rare herbs and medicinals were kept under guard. She took a servant's stare down, avoiding patrols. The cellars were cool, dim, smelling of damp stone and dried thyme. She moved methodically, checking shelves, crates, open ledgers on a work table. Nothing out of place. But then, in a shadowed alcove behind stacked barrels, she spotted a small locked box half buried under sacks of lavender. She pried it open with her knife. Inside the box lay 3 small vials, dark glass, unlabeled, nestled in straw like secrets someone had tried to bury. She lifted one, fingers steady despite the sudden tightness in her chest, and pulled the cork. The scent escaped in a thin, acrid wave, bitter, metallic, edged with something almost medicinal. It slammed into her like a memory she'd spent 5 years trying to outrun. Shadowroot. She knew, it instantly, the same faint, corrosive bite that had lingered in the air the night her pack burned. The raiders had carried pouches of it. She'd smelled it on their gloves when one grabbed her arm before she broke free and ran. Her father had warned her once, voice low over the kitchen table. Shadowroot dulls the wolf inside, breaks bonds, makes you forget what you're fighting for. He'd been documenting it for months before they came for him. Her heart slammed against her ribs, so hard she felt it in her throat. She slipped one vial into the inner pocket of her cloak, pressed the box shut exactly as she'd found it, and retreated up the servant stairs, silent, fast, pulse roaring in her ears. The corridor outside was empty. She leaned against the cool stone for half a heartbeat, breathing through her mouth to clear the scent from her nose. It clung anyway, sharp and accusing. She knew what this meant. Back in her chamber, she waited. When Roman arrived, hair tousled, eyes tired but alert, she held up the vial. "I found this in the lower stores, unlabeled, but it's shadow root, concentrated." Roman's face hardened. He took the vial, inhaled briefly, then sealed it again. "Someone's keeping it here, in my castle." Rosalie's voice stayed steady. "Roman, shadow root suppresses bonds, instincts, memories, if the dose is right. You've said you felt off. Headaches?" He stared at the vial, then at her. "I thought it was guilt from the war, the things I didn't do, the people I couldn't save. But if this has been in my wine, my incense, for years maybe," she finished. "Slow, subtle, keeping you off balance, keeping you from remembering clearly." Roman's jaw clenched. "I felt gaps, not just with you, with everything. Instincts dulled, decisions I second-guessed. I told myself it was nothing." "It's shadow root," she said. "And whoever's dosing, you knew exactly what they were doing." They stared at each other, the truth settling like frost. The traitor was inside the walls, close, trusted. The next morning, Roman dismissed the kitchen staff from his private quarters with a curt order. "I'll handle my own meals until further notice." The servants left with wide eyes and bowed heads, whispers trailing behind them. That evening, Rosalie found him in the small private kitchen attached to his chambers, a room she hadn't known existed. Stone counters, iron stove, a single window overlooking the western gardens now brushed with twilight. Roman stood at the counter, sleeves rolled to his elbows, dusted with flour, chopping vegetables with steady, practiced strokes. She paused in the doorway. "You cook?" He glanced up, a small smile breaking through the tension etched around his eyes. "I used to." He set the knife down, wiped his hands on a cloth, and looked at her. "I don't trust anyone else's hands on my food right now, not until we know who's been dosing me." Rosalie stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The bond hummed softly between them, stronger tonight, less frayed. "So we cook like fugitives in your own castle." "Something like that." He gestured to the pile of ingredients. "Help me. Unless you're afraid of onions." She bit back a laugh and moved to his side. Their shoulders brushed as she reached for a knife. For a moment, neither spoke. They just worked side by side, the quiet rhythm of chopping and stirring filling the space. Roman slid a pan onto the stove before glancing at her. "You're good with a blade, even in here." "I've had practice, so don't mess with me," she said dryly. He laughed, and the sound eased something tight in her chest. They moved around each other with growing ease. She passed him salt. He handed her a wooden spoon. When their fingers brushed, neither pulled away. Roman reached for a small jar of dried leaves from a shelf. He measured a careful pinch into the pot. "These are good for calming things," he said quietly. "Helps with heat surges, takes the edge off without dulling everything else." Rosalie's knife stilled. She looked at him, seeing the careful way he'd chosen the herbs. "You planned this." "I noticed," he said simply. "The way you shift when it rises, the way your breath catches. I didn't want you suffering through it alone." He met her eyes, steady and soft. "Not when I can help." The bond pulsed, warm, grateful. Rosalie set the knife down and stepped closer. "You're a romantic, aren't you?" He gave a small smile. "Guilty," My sister used to tease me about it, said I'd court a woman with stew and stars instead of jewels and proclamations. He stirred the pot once more, then turned to face her fully. I'd rather make you feel safe than make a spectacle. She swallowed, throat tight. I haven't felt safe in years. I know. He reached out slowly and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. But you're safe with me, Rosalie. Always. Rosalie leaned into his touch, letting herself feel it, the warmth of his palm, the steady thrum of the bond, the way his gaze never wavered. Keep cooking, Your Majesty. I'm starving. Roman's smile widened, and he turned back to the stove, but not before brushing his thumb once more across her cheek. As my lady commands. They ate at the small table by the window, simple stew and bread, the meal tasting better than anything she'd had in years. Not because of the food, because they'd made it together, because he'd chosen herbs to ease her heat, because when their knees brushed under the table, neither moved away. For the first time in a long time, neither of them was alone in the dark. The next day, Roman sent discreet inquiries to trusted border contacts, old soldiers who owed him favors, asking about Shadowroot shipments without alerting the council. Rosalie mapped the palace routines, noting who entered the lower stores, who left with packages, who avoided the cellars entirely. They compared notes each night in the kitchen, cooking side by side, the ritual becoming their only safe ground. The bond steadied in those quiet hours, stronger when they touched, when Roman's hand brushed hers over a cutting board, or Rosalie leaned into him while the stew simmered. Her heat rose in waves, leaving her flushed and restless, but Roman never pushed. He simply stayed close, protective, patient, his presence a steady anchor, until the night the guard died. They were in the kitchen again, Roman stirring broth while Rosalie sliced herbs, when the knock came, urgent, panicked. A guard burst in without waiting. Your Majesty, lower halls, one of yours. His throat was slit, a note was left. Roman's spoon clattered to the floor. They ran. The corridor was chaos, overturned torches spitting sparks, blood slick on stone, a body slumped against the wall. One of Roman's most loyal guards, eyes wide in death. A note pinned to his chest in rough script. She brings ruin. Remove her, or lose everything. Rosalie stared at the words until they blurred. Roman's face went white. Lord Veyron arrived moments later, expression grave but composed. A tragedy. The assassin escaped, but 2 guards swear they saw a woman in a dark cloak fleeing the scene. It's your refugee, Your Majesty. Heat-addled, perhaps. Unstable. Roman's eyes snapped to him. What guards? Veyron gestured calmly to 2 men standing rigid nearby. They saw her near the body, running. One claims she dropped this. He held up a small silver locket, Rosalie's locket, the one she'd worn every day since the raid. The chain was broken, as if torn off in a struggle. Rosalie's hand flew to her throat. She hadn't even noticed it was gone. The bond flickered, thin, uncertain, for the first time since the vial. Roman looked at her, only for a heartbeat. But the hesitation was there. Shadowroot fog, doubt creeping in like ink in water. Pain lanced through her, sharper than any blade. He was doubting her. She turned and walked, fast, controlled, out of the corridor, past the staring guards, out a side door into the night. Branches tore at her cloak. She was heading for the outer woods where she could think, where she could breathe. The bond flickered weakly behind her, thin, distant, like a thread fraying under too much strain. She didn't get far. A whistle sliced the dark, sharp, commanding. Torches flared to life in a wide circle around the clearing she'd stumbled into. Veyron's men, 20, maybe more, emerged from the trees, armed with short blades and crossbows loaded with bolts that gleamed unnaturally under the moonlight. Veyron himself stood at the center, silver hair catching the light like frost, his face calm, almost serene. "You're so predictable, Lady Rosalie," he said. "Always running, always alone." Rosalie drew her knife, backing up slowly, muscles coiling like a spring. "It was you who sent the note." "I shaped the narrative," Veyron replied, his smile polite. "A necessary escalation. The king is compromised. The fog in his mind is thick tonight. Thicker than usual, actually. When he started cooking his own meals, I simply adjusted. Shadowroot in the burners, the linens, even the ink on his parchments. He'll believe what the evidence tells him, and the evidence paints you as the threat." The bond flickered again, weak, distant. Roman was coming. She felt the faint, desperate tug, but the fog was winning. He wouldn't arrive in time. Pain bloomed in her chest, hot and raw, but she shoved it down. "You've been poisoning him for years. Why?" Veyron tilted his head, studying her with mild curiosity. "Because he was weak, unbonded. I gave him clarity. Shadowroot gave him clarity." He lifted his hand, revealing a silver ring etched with a familiar glyph, a circle bisected by a jagged line. "Do you recognize it? The symbol your father chased to his death. It's mine. My bond was severed years ago, my mate taken by the same border wars that scarred your king. I learned then, true power comes from control, not sentiment. No bonds to weaken the mind, no distractions." Rosalie's grip tightened on the knife. "You killed my pack, all of them." "I eliminated obstacles," Veyron correctly evenly. "Your father got too close, saw too much." He gestured. 2 men advanced, blades drawn. Rosalie fought, knife flashing, 1 man down, blood hot and sticky on her hands, but they were too many. A crossbow bolt grazed her thigh. Pain exploded white hot, her leg buckling. She staggered. Another bolt whistled, laced with shadowroot this time, the bitter scent hitting her nose before it struck her shoulder. The toxin burned through her veins, dulling her edges, but her ashroot tolerance held, just barely. Veyron watched, unruffled. "Take her alive. The king will want to see her execution himself." A roar shattered the night, deep, primal, furious. Roman burst from the trees in wolf form, massive, golden-eyed, teeth bared. He tore into the circle like a storm, ripping through men, blood and screams filling the dark. But the fog lingered, slowing him, instincts blunted, reflexes sluggish. Crossbows twanged, shadowroot-laced bolts finding fur, finding flesh. He staggered, blood matting his coat, wounds burning with toxin that deepened the haze in his mind. Still, he kept coming, driven by the bond, by rage, by love that cut through the fog like a blade. Veyron drew his short blade, silvered, poisoned. "Stand down, your majesty, or she dies first." Roman shifted back, bleeding from 6 wounds, breathing labored. The fog pressed in, vision blurring, but he stepped between Rosalie and Veyron, shielding her with his body. "You," Roman growled, voice raw. "It was you." Veyron's smile never faltered. "You're late again, my king, just like last time." Rosalie's vision swam. Pain, blood loss, heat surging uncontrollably now, ashroot burned away by adrenaline and terror. The wolf inside her howled, no longer chained. She felt it rise, fierce, desperate, protective. The shift tore through her like lightning through flesh. Bones cracked and reformed in a symphony of agony, muscles stretching, tearing, rebuilding in a rush that made her scream, a sound that twisted into a howl. Fur rippled across her skin like fire spreading over dry grass, silver and sleek under the moon. Her senses exploded, the tang of blood thick in the air, the burn of shadowroot on the bolts, the frantic heartbeats of the men around her. Pain became power, Hunger became fury, and with the shift came memory, flooding back unbidden, unlocked by her wolf's raw instinct. She saw the raid anew, Veyron in the shadows that night, directing the raiders with quiet commands, his silver hair catching firelight as he watched her family burn, his face calm, composed, while her father begged for mercy. She snarled, amber eyes blazing, and lunged. Veyron's men faltered. Roman roared, shifting back to wolf form despite the fog's drag, and together they fought, teeth and claws, fury and bond, tearing through the circle. Veyron retreated, blade flashing, slipping through the chaos toward the trees. He almost made it, darting between two fallen men, cloak billowing like a shadow. But Rosalie was faster. She leaped, claws raking his back, pinning him to the ground with her weight. Blood welled hot under her paws. Veyron gasped, blade clattering away. Roman shifted back, blood streaming from wounds laced with shadowroot that burned like acid in his veins. The fog pressed harder now, vision graying, strength ebbing, but he knelt beside Veyron, hand closing around the man's throat. "Why?" Roman's voice was wrecked. Veyron laughed, soft, bitter, blood bubbling on his lips. "Because you were weak, unbonded, easy to steer, and she..." He looked at Rosalie, teeth inches from his throat. "She was the one thing that could wake you up." Roman's hand tightened. "You killed her family. You poisoned me. For power." "For order," Veyron whispered. "The kingdom needed a strong hand, not a lovesick king." Rosalie growled low, pressing closer, the weight of her father's memory fueling the rage in her chest. Roman looked at her, eyes full of pain, love, regret. "Your father's last words to me were, 'The traitor wears trust like a mask.'" Veyron smiled one last time, eyes glazing. "And I wore it well." Roman's hand moved, swift, final. Veyron's neck snapped. Silence fell, broken only by Roman's labored breathing. Rosalie shifted back, the change reversing in a rush of pain, leaving her naked, trembling, blood-smeared. Roman caught her as her legs gave out, pulling her against his chest despite his own wounds. His body shook, fog and shadowroot draining him, but he held her like she was the only thing keeping him upright. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. "I doubted you back there." She pressed her forehead to his, tasting blood and sweat. "You came. I will always come for you." They knelt in the clearing, surrounded by bodies and moonlight, holding each other as the world finally stopped trying to tear them apart. 3 nights later, the moon rose full over Eldrath's western gardens. Rosalie stood barefoot at the tree line, night air cool against her skin, the dew-kissed grass soft under her toes. The wounds from the clearing had healed. Roman's bloodline magic had seen to that, but the deeper ache, the one carved by years of running and hiding, still lingered like a bruise under the surface. Roman approached from the castle path, his steps quiet, his presence a warm pull through the bond. He wore only loose trousers, no tunic, no armor, just the man she'd come to know in stolen kitchen hours and shared nightmares. His own scars were fading, the shadowroot finally purged from his veins after days of careful antidotes and rest. The fog was gone. His amber eyes were clear, bright, full of the quiet certainty she'd glimpsed that first night in the forest. "You ready?" he asked softly, stopping close enough that she could feel his heat. Rosalie nodded, a small, nervous smile tugging at her lips. "It's been 5 years since I let her out for a non-emergency." Roman reached for her hand, fingers intertwining with hers. "She remembers, and she's not angry anymore." He lifted her knuckles to his lips, kissed them gently. "She's home." Rosalie closed her eyes and reached inward. The shift came gently this time, not the desperate violence of battle, but a fluid unfolding, like stepping into warm water after years in chains. Bones softened and reshaped with a deep, satisfying stretch. Fur rippled silver across her skin like moonlight on a river. Senses bloomed sharp and vivid. The world sharpened, the rich soil under her paws, the night jasmine on the breeze, Roman's pine storm scent wrapping around her. She shook out her coat, tail wagging once, and looked up at him with bright amber eyes. Roman's breath caught. He knelt, running both hands through her thick silver fur, fingers burying deep at her ruff. "Gods," he whispered. "Look at you. Silver like the moon itself." His thumbs traced the soft fur along her jaw. "I saw you fight, but this is different. This is you. Free." Her wolf yipped, pure joy, and nosed into his chest, licking his chin with quick, affectionate swipes. Roman laughed, low and delighted, and shifted in one fluid motion, wheat gold fur rippling over powerful muscle, his massive form gleaming under the moon. He was larger than her, but when he dropped into a playful bow, front paws stretched, tail wagging furiously, it was with the gentle invitation of a mate who knew every scar she carried. Rosalie's wolf yipped again, ecstatic, and bounded forward, nipping lightly at his ear before darting away. Roman gave chase, playful, letting her lead. They tore through the gardens, over low hedges, under arching oaks, the world a blur of silver and gold. She teased him, doubling back to leap onto his back. He rolled with her in the grass, nuzzling her neck, paws gentle as they pinned her for a heartbeat, before letting her up with a happy huff. When they finally slowed, panting, Roman shifted back first. He caught her wolf form mid-leap, cradling her against his chest as she shifted in his arms, silver fur receding, skin warm against his. They tumbled to the grass together, her laughter soft against his neck. Roman pulled her close, hands roaming her back, her sides, memorizing every inch. "I love seeing you like this," he murmured against her hair. He pressed a kiss to her, temple. 5 years chasing a ghost, and here you are, running back to me. Rosalie pressed her face into the crook of his neck, breathing him in. Pine, storm, safety. "I've had a lot of practice with running." He tilted her chin up, eyes soft and shining. "Well, I'd chase you anywhere, Rosalie. Moonlit gardens, battlefields, kitchens, as long as you're running toward me at the end." She smiled, small, real, unguarded, and kissed him slow and deep, hands sliding into his hair. The bond flared bright and golden, wrapping them like a promise finally kept. Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. And if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear this story.